So I've been playing this game called Chrono Trigger. I've played it front to back now 3 times, each about 10 years apart, and I've noticed something about it on my most recent playthrough. Both times I replayed the game, I did so more out of a feeling of obligation and maybe curiosity than a feeling of excitement. I have this idea in my head that certain pieces of media are just part of the canon, and Chrono Trigger is such a game. As a JRPG fan, I feel like I should have a well-developed opinion on certain canonical works of the genre, and every so often I need to revisit those opinions. That is to say, if I want to hold and voice an opinion like Chrono Trigger is kind of overrated, I should be able to hold that opinion confident that my feelings on the work haven't changed. For instance, when I was 14, I thought Watchmen was overrated, but I reread it in my 30s, and surprise, everybody's right, it's one of the greatest comics ever made. So maybe the same thing will happen to Chrono Trigger for me one day. Because everybody says Chrono Trigger is a masterpiece. It's widely considered a 10 out of 10, or the best RPG on the Super Nintendo, or a top 10 game, period. It's well decorated with praise. My clickbait title is probably going to be the worst 10 out of 10 I've ever played, which is a little cheeky, but I think there's a grain of truth in there. I don't hate it, but when I think about replaying Chrono Trigger specifically, I just, So why is that? On my most recent playthrough, I really wanted to dig in and try to figure that out. Chrono Trigger is legitimately part of video game history that most people will be talking about in 100 years. It has some of the best art on the Super Nintendo, it has a rock-solid soundtrack containing some all-timers, it has an intricate story and world with endearing characters, and I think they hold up well even against modern expectations. The gameplay is inviting and well-balanced, it's full of surprises, and it includes extra flourishes and optional content that it really didn't need to include. An optional character, multiple endings, and other Easter eggs. None of this makes me want to play it a second time, though. So, if Chrono Trigger doesn't do it, what does make me excited to replay a game? Well, I figured I should think about some games I replay frequently because I am excited to, and what they have in common. And I think I've boiled it down to 2 main elements: challenge and choice. Challenge is obvious. I like solving problems, I like testing limits, I like learning, I like overcoming challenges. It's rewarding even if the challenges are artificial, like they are in a video game. Muscle memory is an easy way to insert replayable challenge, like the footage here is the game Fury, a game I could replay endlessly, but you do not need this type of challenge to be a tough game. Prior to Chrono Trigger, I was playing Grandia 3, which is purely turn-based, and that game was tough. I was losing fights left and right, it felt dynamic and uncertain, and for all the game's other problems, the game was better for its difficulty. And when it comes to choice, I think everybody knows what I mean, like, yes, whenever you press a button, you're making a choice, but if the choice only influences the likelihood of winning or losing the game, that's not what I'm talking about here. Most RPGs contain macro-level choices connected to a feeling of player expression that influence a range of possible outcomes in the game. Take Disco Elysium, which has virtually no component of challenge, but you are given choice after choice after choice. How to build and advance your character, what personality to embody, the story threads you want to pursue. It is an open field, and all of these choices, even the seemingly innocuous ones, have a marked impact on the events that unfold and how you experience them. Each experience is highly individualized, and that makes replaying the game an absolute treat. And finally, if you have a game that is both deep in challenge and choice, you create something that's nearly infinitely replayable. I was putting thousands of hours in Dwarf Fortress when it was still ASCII graphics and lacked any structured narrative, and it was the steep learning curve and the incredible freedom to mess up and destroy myself mixed with the absolute freedom of expression that made the game so engaging to return to over and over again for a decade. This is, of course, fundamentally different from how I approach other media like books or movies. Challenge and choice are cornerstones of games as a medium. Very few other types of media have challenge or choice in any capacity. I will rewatch a movie or reread a book, but it's a purely passive, familiar experience, completely different than the expectations that I have when I approach a game that I'm replaying, which I still hold to quite a high bar of interactivity. Back to Chrono Trigger, despite it being a tour de force in basically every other aspect, the game has virtually no challenge and no meaningful choice, at least not to anybody familiar with the conventions of the genre. Am I saying Chrono Trigger has bad gameplay? No. It has entry-level gameplay. I think the first time you play, there's enough to discover that it's not totally bland. Again, the presentation is great and everything is consistently balanced. It's so smooth that it's almost frictionless. And if you're new to JRPGs as a genre, this is what you're looking for. You're looking for something to invite you in. If we're evaluating this as a beginner-friendly JRPG, Chrono Trigger is spot on. It's extremely inviting. But I'm an old dog at this. In terms of challenge, random encounters in Chrono Trigger are laughably easy. Dungeons are short, and recovery items like ethers are plentiful, so there's never any real risk of running low on resources. It feels like I could use my strongest techniques every fight, even though it's absolutely overkill to do so, and I would never run low on resources. Any puzzles or mazes or other dungeon design elements like that are too simple to stand out in my brain. Usually they're just interact with this thing to open the way forward or sidestep these enemies. Bosses offer the greatest challenge in the game, but it's really the one-time thrill of figuring out their gimmick and how to exploit it, and it's something that once solved is drained of any challenge that it once possessed. Alternating physical and magic attacks and those types of gimmicks against a boss really don't get my neurons firing anymore, and I think I need a little bit more to hold my engagement. In terms of narrative choice, Chrono Trigger hides well the fact that the first two-thirds of the game are entirely linear, by bouncing you around different time periods and different maps in a very unpredictable fashion, but it's only unpredictable the first time. The game exists in two states. The first is a linear series of checkpoints, each required to trigger the next, generally, but not always, revealing a new area or a new dungeon at each checkpoint. Once you've cleared enough of these story checkpoints, the second section of the game is an open world segment, which really just becomes a checklist. There aren't any interesting consequences or trade-offs in this section of the game. You have a bunch of optional objectives that you can do in any order, and doing so rewards you with more power. You could say that some of the big side quests here do have narrative consequence, and sure, in a very literal sense they do, but the only choice here is really, do you want to do the thing that will reward you, both mechanically and narratively, or do you not want to bother? Do you want to squeeze all the content you can out of this game, or do you want to sprint for the finish line? Now, I will admit that most good JRPGs of this era fall into the same structure, the very tight linear first half of the game, followed by kind of an open world checklist style second half of the game, but I'm always happy to replay a game like Final Fantasy V or Final Fantasy VI, so what's missing? Systemic choice is a very important part of RPGs for me. Being able to express yourself through the mechanics of the game, even if the narrative is the same every time, gives the player a real sense of ownership to the experience. Not to mention the fact that having different strategic options available on a different playthrough changes the texture of battles. It makes the same challenges feel fresh because you have different tools in your belt. At least that's how it should feel when this is employed well. In Chrono Trigger, each party member always advances the same way, and always learns the same abilities, and always has the same stats. Systemic choice, then, basically boils down to two decisions. The first of which is who is in your party. Yes, you can make this decision as many times as you want, swapping characters based on the challenges you need to come, but there is really no need. Any trio of characters can take on any challenge, although maybe low healing parties will have a bit more difficulty. But the game is really not difficult enough to incentivize switching once you've chosen your three. The second decision is your gear. For weapons and armor, there's always an obvious best in slot at any point in the game, so you're not really making a choice there. Really, the only substantive choice insofar as gear is concerned is what accessory to equip, and while the difference between a berserker and a gold hairpin is stark, it is just too little too late. The player doesn't feel like they have any meaningful say in how their characters develop or how they perform in battle. When I finally cleared the Black Omen a few days ago, it was just an absolute slog, and it's not a long game. It's really a tragedy. The game's got so much polish and heart, and it's just incredibly endearing, but it's really, really carried by the aesthetics of the experience, the art, the music, the writing. It's a weird game to hold up as this pinnacle of the genre, especially all these years later, when the actual game design, the things that make it distinct from a novel or anime or whatever, has little to engage a fan of the genre. It kind of feels like a 5-star meal that left me hungry. So in conclusion, I guess, is Chrono Trigger really that good? Is Chrono Trigger overrated? I don't know, man. Sound off in the comments, I guess. I will argue with you if I disagree. Bye-bye.